Okay.
All right, guys, I love you.
Bye, Mom. Have fun.
Bye, Mama.
Bye, Mommy.
It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's fine. It's probably fine. It's gonna be fine.
How'd it go?
It was fine.
Well, hey, everybody. Good morning. My wife is actually in the mountains with our daughter and some of her friends for her birthday, so I've got 3 boys at home, and that video feels a little too real today. So anyway, glad you're joining us. We are continuing on in our series called It's Fine, and we're so glad that you're here for it. We know that there are these lines that we can say from time to time, and if we're honest, really they can be lies. They can just be ways for us to avoid what's actually going on underneath the hood in our lives, what's really going on in our heads and hearts. And so we've taken a look at a couple different ones. If you missed Kelsey's last week, definitely go check it out. And today we're gonna talk about this idea that we say, right, it's just a phase, or maybe you say it's just a season. And sometimes that's true, but a lot of times I think what it is it's an excuse to not have to deal with maybe the pace that we're living at that we shouldn't be, or the priorities that are misaligned, and why maybe today could be the right day to change that. I also want to let you know that as a community, we have kind of these annual rhythms that we do around here, and especially if you're new or newer, we have one coming up next week that I want to make sure you're prepared for. You guys did an amazing job. Kind of ending a calendar year is a really big deal for any church financially, and you guys were amazing. Many of you gave for the very first time. It was really humbling to see how God provided through your generosity. And while that is amazing, we really want to make sure that you can give attention to your intention. And the way we do that is we try to help people make giving a priority. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's the case next week. But what that means is there's a way to automate your giving, to say, hey, we feel like God is calling us, or you feel like God is calling me to give this amount this often on this day. And we have a platform we use to help you do that. And so next week, I'm actually going to walk you through step by step to help you do that. If that's maybe something you haven't done here, maybe you're newer to Eastern Hills, or you've been watching online for a while, and you want to be a part of fueling financially what God is doing in this place, we'd love to have you help. So there's a kid back there that's jacked about it. Just want you guys to not be surprised about it. Unless people are here like next week and weren't here this week, then they're gonna be surprised, but you just tap them on the shoulder and say, before you get offended, he tried to prep you, but you didn't show up last week. Before we get started, though, I'm gonna pray for us, and if you've never been here before or never heard me speak, I pray kneeling. And we're gonna talk about to a certain extent, the importance of humility and service today, why it's so important that our perspective is shaped by those things. And so just for a moment, wherever you are, online, here in the room, would you humble yourself in the quiet of your heart as we talk to God together? God, thank you so much. Thank you for the gift that we get to be able to share this time together, whether that's through a screen or here in the room. God, thank you for the gift that it is, that we get to be able to sing to you, that we get to be able to sing with one another, and the idea that, God, we can learn and grow even right now. Even if somebody in here doesn't know you, isn't connected to you, that, God, I believe you are just waiting to make their life better and their eternity fuller than it could ever be without you. It's in Jesus' name, amen. So we're gonna talk about why this idea of it's just a phase can be one of those excuses that we use. But there are some things in life, especially if you have little kids, where it being just a phase is kind of a good thing, right? Like you're trying to survive through it. There's actually another way that being just a phase can be really helpful, because there are these pictures that, if you can believe it or not, these are all me. So if you're like, wow, Phil, you've always been really good looking and stylish. I know it's a burden, but I'm just gonna hang with it. And maybe you have some pictures like that. And if you're younger in the room, no, color photography did exist. This was just like a style decision that they were making, okay, I promise. But as we think about that kind of in our own lives, and we think about the pictures of success and how those have changed over the years, as you get older, the picture of success in our culture sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? I mean, you get a place of leadership, you get influence, maybe affluence, where you report to no one, and everyone in your life is there to make you comfortable and make your life more convenient. And it's something that you growingly, increasingly feel universally entitled to the longer you climb the ladder. Today we're gonna talk a lot about kids, but even if you don't have kids, I think it applies to all of us. Kids are just this really amazing example of little people in our lives who do not spend a lot of time trying to think about your comfort or your convenience. As a matter of fact, I have kids, 4 kids, 12 to 2, and I think that they actually have some sort of covert mission to go against my comfort and convenience. That feels like the daily goal in our house, right? And how we handle that disconnect individually and as families between what we want and what we get is a big deal. And for a lot of us, we just sort of find a quick fix that gives us what we want now rather than investing in what we want later or ultimately. And our excuse is that the compromise we are making is just for a season. It's just a phase. You just have to do it right now. But our decisions, even those quick fix decisions, they have consequences. A couple years ago, I was helping a buddy mount a new TV in his basement. And his basement had been finished by the person who lived there before, who had been a contractor. And so I went down, and it was a pretty quick job, no big deal. I zipped it up, and I would say this, I have probably mounted, no joke, minimum 50 televisions. Like, it is just a thing that my friends know about me, that I put up TVs. And if you're like, Phil, you're handy? No, I'm not. I just can put up TVs for some reason. But this may change. If you're like, I need to reach out to you to put a TV up in my house, let me tell you why you may not do that. A few weeks later, maybe even a couple months, I get the TV up, everything's good, but I get this text message from my friend late one night. And it's one of those ones where you get the first text message, and then you see the dots underneath it that they're typing, and you're like, did someone die? Oh my gosh, what happened? And it turns out it's actually worse, because this is the next picture that I got. Yeah, that was my response. And I mean, it's like 10:30 at night. I go to bed pretty early. And so I'm like all of a sudden just in a cold sweat. And I'm like, what happened? How do we fix this, right? And thankfully, a couple buddies and I were able to make it right, get a big TV and go in there. And I put in 3/4-inch plywood with some lag bolts into it. Turns out that what was behind the wall, the stud finder couldn't detect very well. And so what I thought was going into studs were actually not studs. And so it pulled right off the wall. But now you can hang on it. So that's good. And every large TV I install, I do the same thing so that I don't have nightmares about getting a text message just like that, right? But some of you, if you're honest, you have been hanging some expectations in your life too. Maybe some expectations in your kid's life pretty quick, without thinking about the support that sits underneath those expectations and pressures. And after a little while, the foundations that God actually wants in your life, in your family, and in the lives of your kids, those foundations that aren't where they need to be, those things that you put there, those expectations and pressures, they start to rip off. And as they do, they create damage in your life, in your family, in your kids' lives. Damage that can actually ripple into even further generations. And when we start to see something slipping or a behavior that we don't like, often we're confused and we're frustrated, and usually the temptation is to run to a Band-Aid. Usually the temptation is to find some quick fix with our child, whether they're young or maybe they're a student, maybe they're a young adult, and we go, how do I just get back to my comfort and my convenience and not have to deal with this? But the problem with this approach is that while it may help your comfort and convenience, it won't help you long-term, and it won't help your kids and your family. We have to resist the urge to make our kids' performance indicate our significance. And the reason for that is because quick fixes lead to long-term problems. And maybe for you, you feel like your kids are pretty young and it's not that big of a deal. Or you're in a season of life where you don't have any kids and you're like, oh, I don't think it's gonna matter that much. And I would just say you should add the word yet to that statement, because it will come back to you. And today we're gonna talk about maybe how to make a change before it does. We're gonna look at 3 interactions that Jesus has with others and the importance of 3 different attributes in our lives that actually come from a really helpful book, especially of teenagers. It's a book called 3 Big Questions that change every teenager. And if you have a teenager and you're like, they speak a foreign language, I have no idea how to interact with them, I know that they're struggling, but I'm not sure how to talk to them about it, this is a great resource. If you're online, you can find a link to this and a number of other resources underneath weekend resources at ehills.org/weekend. If you're here on our campus, this resource and many others are at the family phase walls right out in our lobby. See, we're gonna take a look though at what Jesus has to say about these things, because I think ultimately he gives you and me a framework to be able to go from quick fix to something so much better. And it starts by developing identity. I think this is something that all of us need to do, and especially if you're a parent, you have to understand that we live in a landscape of identity in our culture. And there are so many competing identities today, so many different things that our world is saying you should hang the weight of your life, your right now and your forever, on this identity. Identities that range from gender and sexuality to profession and education, sports loyalties, even food preferences, right? We have made these things, these tribal corners that we run to, and we ask these categories to hold the weight that only God was designed to. You've heard me say it before if you've been around here for a little while. Your true identity, no matter what you believe about God, is that you're an image bearer of the creator of the universe, that you've been created with infinite dignity, value, and worth. And from that flows the core identity that we'll look at from Jesus. And I think, well, we may want to look at the pressure that power and money put on us. What about what God has from you? What about what God has for you? What he wants to do through your life if you'll look at his answer for your identity. The disciples, who are Jesus' closest friends, they were always showing how much they didn't quite understand this. They didn't understand really their identity all the time, and they definitely didn't understand the nature of the kingdom that Jesus was here to reveal. And so we're gonna step into a moment where their most recent request was asking about the seating arrangements in the new kingdom. They were asking where they were gonna sit and what kind of prestige they were gonna get. And Jesus doesn't just answer them. It says this: Jesus called them, like all of his disciples that were around, to him and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." See, Jesus, he gets this group together, this group that's been following around every day, and he shares with them the difference of their identity compared to the identity of the leaders that they had watched their entire lives. See, the leaders they knew were always cutting corners in a way that benefited those leaders and undermined and undercut the Jewish people. As a people under Roman rule, there was basically nothing that the Jewish people in this region could do about it. The Jewish people had been given kind of special dispensation, special permission to be able to practice their faith in Rome in a way that was unique, in a way that other religions weren't allowed to do. But even though that had been done on paper, there was still all of this undercurrent flowing from government corruption to tax theft by overcharging them what they really owed, to the religious persecution that came uniquely for them. And then this idea that they were basically gonna be a second-class citizen compared to their non-Jewish counterparts their entire life under Roman rule. And so the problem, right, is that we all have experienced bad leadership. We have all experienced someone in our life that should care for us and be a servant and be kind and be loving and wasn't. And maybe that was a parent. Maybe that was a bad boss. Maybe that was a terrible neighbor. Maybe that was a bad leader in your kind of life sphere. But here's the thing. Sometimes when we see abuses of power, if we're not thoughtful and we're just set to quick fixes, instead of wanting better and pursuing influence to be servants to make it better out of our true identity, what happens is we actually just kind of want that kind of power. It's why we sometimes turn out to be the very person or leader that we most resented. We end up feeling like we have earned our way to the same kinds of influence, to the same kinds of decision power, and to the same sort of perks that we were so frustrated that they leaned towards. See, the quick fixes of flexing that power was never what Jesus wanted us to be about, because it's not what he was about, and it's not who you are in him. Jesus shared that our identity as people who follow him is to be a servant, and that the ladder of leadership for people who are followers of Jesus is a ladder down in service, not a ladder up in status. And that is completely different than the standard of leadership, service, and influence in our world. See, to Jesus, the greater you want to lead, the more you must serve. And it's that he ultimately modeled for us. See, Jesus, the greatest leader of all time, what does the passage say? He was a ransom for all of us. He served all of us by dying as our sacrifice, by stepping in and taking the pain and the punishment for our sin, for our brokenness, individually and collectively. And pressure has this funny way in our lives of revealing our true identity. of showing who we truly are. And in Jesus' case, when the pressure got its worst, he got his best. And he showed you and me what it looked like to stand up to unjust practices, to things being wrongfully done to him, and ultimately dying on your and my behalf without even defending himself. And so for you and me to model who we are in Jesus, right, we have to take a step back and say, who do I show up as when the pressure comes, right? Are you patient in that moment, or are you angry because your convenience and comfort are being disrupted? Are you compassionate for others because that's what they need, or just callous for the sake of your own return to norm? See, the path of restoring our identity with Jesus is to face the goal of our lives, to look at what we're really after. And I wonder, what do you really want, and what are you willing to do to get it? And if you ask that question in the quiet of your heart, the more self-focused the real answer is, the further you are from your true identity in Jesus. And the very thing you're desperate to get will not satisfy you, even if you get it. A friend of mine recently was just talking about this new routine and rhythm he's trying to incorporate in his life in the new year, where when he wakes up in the morning, before he hits the ground, before he goes out through the rest of his day, he spends just a minute talking to God and asking, who can I serve other than myself, and what can I do for them? And I think that's a great practice, because I think our culture is so self-focused. And I think it takes energy and effort for you and me to say, you know what my true identity is? My true identity is serving other people. And so I'm willing to put what I need on hold to put other people first. And for you, it could be this really small step, this really small thing, or maybe it's gonna be really big. But you and I, we walk in our true identity when we look to service rather than status. I don't know if you know this about yourself, right? But it's kind of easy for our desire to serve to come from a different place, not really to serve or honor God, but to get the accolades from other people. And I think sometimes if we're not careful, we sort of serve in a counterfeit way. We're not doing it for God. And even if you can't see that in yourself, you've definitely seen it in other people, right? That the thing that they do that's like a 2 out of 10 serve thing, you find it on their Instagram later and it looks like they just cured world hunger, right? You're like, you had avocado toast. I don't think it's that big a deal. Like, yeah, you made it for your kid too. I think we're good. I didn't need to know this. So we need to always sort of inspect our own hearts and inspect what it means for why we are serving, not just what we are serving. And the counterfeit can look pretty real, right? I know that for a lot of you, you're not sneakerheads. You don't like spend a lot of time on sneakers, but sneakers are a really big business now. As a matter of fact, there's like a whole industry that just is crazy. I have a buddy who's so into sneakers that I'm on a text thread with him and a few other people. And when a new sneaker release comes out, there's like a specific time. It's like when the iPhone used to come out. And you have to like tap and hopefully you win. And if you win, then you get to buy the shoe at regular price. And so it's this like thread. And then they'll go sell those shoes for thousands of dollars. And I'm like, it was worth like 120 and now it's worth like 1,000. Obviously I don't get it. But the thing that's happened because of that industry is that there's been a huge industry of counterfeits that have happened too. And if you look at what some of the counterfeits look like, they become so sophisticated that if you were to see what the real shoe looks like versus what the fake shoe looks like, unless you knew everything about it, you wouldn't be able to detect the difference. And it's funny because there's a group of people that have sort of taken it upon themselves to be the people that make sure that it's actually correct. See, the counterfeiters, they go through all this work and all this effort to make something that's fake look real. And I wonder in your own life if what it means to follow Jesus and what your true identity is. You haven't been actually releasing that to God. You haven't been letting him talk to you about what it might look like to make that shift in your life. You've just been applying all the same energy and effort to looking the part, even though you know you're faking it. See, the quick fix decisions in some of our lives, they started small. But over time, just like those counterfeit shoes, right? It gets more complicated and more complicated and more complicated to keep up the lie. See, we put in so much effort to look like our identity is truly connected to Jesus, but I wonder, is it just a show in your life? Because a servant heart actually reveals in you and me that we're connected to the true identity that we have been given in Jesus. But here's the thing, quick fixes, they don't stay quick, they don't stay easy, and whatever they're aimed at it actually never really gets fixed. If you have kids, this is a really hard truth, but the easiest place to see your true identity and the identity of your family is in their level of entitlement. Because for us as adults, like it's kind of easy, especially if you've been in church for a little while. You know the stuff you're supposed to say and the stuff you're not supposed to say, the way you're supposed to carry yourself. How's your week? Great. How you doing? Blessed. What are you working through? Oh, God's just got us in a tough season right now. We know all the words to say, but our kids, they don't fake it like that. And it's hard to look in the mirror of it, but I don't know about you, how many times has your child done something or said something and you realize like, oh, I wonder where they learned that. And in my case, I just think, their mom, and for you, she's gone this weekend, it's fine, don't tell her, we'll keep it between us. For you, maybe that's something you have to look at. Because here's the thing, it's so easy to just fake it, to just give your kids what they want, that'll make them quiet, to tell them to do what they want, just kind of like let it go. But the value of servanthood and their true identity and your true identity will never transfer to the next generation if that's how we approach it. This is why we spend a lot of time as a community trying to come up with opportunities and partner organizations for you and your family to serve alongside of. It takes effort in our culture to walk this true identity as servants and to instill this in our families, but the effort is worth it. Your kids, their obedience, it's not about your convenience. It's about their character. And so even though it's harder, even though it takes more time, aim at character first, then conduct. Aim at love first, then correction. Because these lines that we say, these lies that we've become so familiar with, that it's just a season, it's just a phase, it's just a team party, it's just another weekend trip, it's just another charge on the credit card. These are easy explanations in the moment, but quick fixes lead to long-term problems. Quick fix parenting, quick fix spending, quick fix careering, quick fix living will always bring consequences later. So, if we want to start walking out our true identity in Jesus as servant leaders that don't walk with or instill entitlement, then we have to begin, or maybe for some of you continue, investing in belonging. It can't just be enough for you and me to decide that we have some people that know our name. It's going to take more than that. And we all want belonging, don't we? People that we are known to and people that we really know. Kind of the 2 a.m. friend that you can call when things are all wrong in your life, but few of us are actually interested in the investment that it takes to get one of those friends, let alone be one of those people. Quick fix living and quick fix parenting makes finding and keeping a community like that nearly impossible. And for Jesus, he modeled a type of community that felt more like family than friendship. For him, the time that he spent together with them, it wasn't a burden, it was a priority, it was a privilege, it was a gift. We're given a snapshot of this kind of contrast at one point in Matthew's account of Jesus' life. It says, while he was still speaking to the people, behold, his mother and his brothers stood outside, asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who told him, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. This might seem kind of harsh for us, right? You're like, that seems crazy. And actually, in this moment, historically, 2,000 years ago, it would have been even more shocking to the people that he was saying this to, that he was prioritizing the people around him over even his own biological family. He saw that his true spiritual family was a priority that needed to shift other priorities. And he definitely could have said it nicer, but I think he was trying to show something really important to the people that were listening. I think he's trying to show something to you and me now. And it's not an excuse for you to neglect your family for your friends, but it is an appeal to have the kind of spiritual community that you can find real belonging in. Jesus' measurement for that kind of community in his life and for you and me is that there's this spiritual family of people who do the will of God, that is the anchor of their life. And we don't know a ton about Jesus' childhood and growing up, but we know that at least Jesus' brothers were not impressed or convinced of his divinity, that he was the Messiah, the Savior of the world, until after the resurrection. I mentioned this before. I'm the youngest of 4. I have 2 older brothers. It would probably take one of them dying and coming back from the grave for me to believe that about them too. So I get it. I don't think we should be too harsh on them. Instead, though, Jesus, he was committing to the people who were with him. He wasn't going to let his brothers and his mom cut the line. He was committed to the lives of this community and a kingdom that even the community that was following him didn't fully understand. I wonder, what is the standard of your relationships? We often talk about the circles of our relationships, that we should all have an interrelational core of people who know us deeply and we know deeply. That there should definitely be a committed group of people that we know well, that we're tied to, that there's a community beyond that, and then ultimately a crowd. But I just wonder, do you actually have a core of friends that their primary focus in your life is helping to set the pace for you in following Jesus? If you're a parent and all of your friends are just parents who aren't committed to that identity, but their kids are friends with your kids or on the same traveling sports team, we've already talked about this, right? There's this life of service and this pursuit of God. What we talk about here is that we be God-centered and family first. And if your friends are basically other parents that are not committed to that, you will not pull them your way. They will pull you their way. And it doesn't mean that we don't have people in our lives that are close to us and far from God. We absolutely should have those people and extend the love and compassion and mercy of God to them. They just can't go into your relational core. You need to have a group of people who are strong in their faith, who love you deeply and are challenging you in yours. Do you? Are you? See, for too many of us, belonging actually doesn't revolve around God or a shared vision of a life pursuing him. It revolves around common interests. Maybe that's our kids' sports teams or our favorite college or pro team or our preferred alcoholic beverage or winter pastime. There's something in our lives, right, where we can just sort of get connected and we just stay at the surface and we think if I live at the surface with somebody for a long time, they must be a best friend of mine. I hope that you have a bigger picture of belonging than that. See, we can enjoy the things that God gives us. That's amazing, but man, God forbid that we confuse common interest acquaintances for real belonging. I want to share just two things, though, with you that I've made in recent days with where relationships are kind of breaking up and this sense of belonging, especially in our core, has started to become really, really distorted. And then one thing for students, whether you have one or you are one. And for adults, I would say this is really important. I'm seeing this show up a lot, but I think this is universal, that relationships that are going to be in our core, they need to be real and they need to be reciprocal. Here's what I mean. For relationship to be real, it needs to be authentic. They aren't found on social media, and if your friends only know the airbrush version of your life when things are good and you are fine and it's just a season and the other lines you say to avoid depth conversations, they actually don't really know you. And that relationship will never grow to the depths of peeling back the layers of our frustrations, of our insecurities, of our hopes and our dreams. It doesn't have to be that way, but when we settle for it, that is the way that it is. Second, relationships are reciprocal. Some of you are that person where relationships are one-sided and you're always interested in someone else and you're always reaching out and you're always making them a meal and you're always dropping something off and you're always sending them a text message, but no one else can do that for you. You're impenetrable. And then for some of you, it's exactly the opposite. You have people in your life that are doing that really care about you, but you actually care about no one. You do nothing for anyone ever. You don't ask, you're not interested, and healthy core relationships are reciprocal. And I would say a great way to start doing this is to text people in your life and ask them how you can pray for them and then actually pray for them. You might be surprised by what they text back. This actually showed up for me recently. I had a buddy that I was hanging out with one afternoon, and it was a great conversation. We were talking about a lot of stuff that was going on in his world, which I was really honored to even be in the conversation with, to be trusted with. And at the end of our conversation, he asked how he could pray for me. And the conversation went another direction. We got distracted by something, and I never ended up answering the question. And you know, the next day and the next day, he kept texting me and asking me, hey, no, I really want to know, what can I pray for you about? And it was like this, oh yeah, this for him, this isn't a burden. Like this is a part of our relationship. He really genuinely cares. He's really genuinely gonna pray about this stuff. That's what a sense of real belonging is. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but out of true, real relationship. If you're a parent or you're a student, I have a really important lesson for you. With your student or with you, if you are a student, it's a lesson in principle for adults too, but I think students, we can go sideways with this. I was a student pastor for a long time. I said this line thousands of times. Relationships are directional. They are taking you somewhere. No relationship is stagnant. If you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And I've just watched kid after kid after kid, unfortunately some adults too, who they will show me their friends and they'll show me the priorities of what their friends are by what they choose to do together or how they choose to spend their money. And I'll just think to myself, you think that this isn't affecting you, but it already is. And so if you're a student in the room, I would just caution you. Do you want the same future of the people in your life that are closest to you? If not, you should change the people who are closest to you. And it doesn't mean that you should freeze out the friends that are getting in trouble or making stupid decisions. You should love them well. You should keep them in a relationship, but it means that you need to have a core of relationships in your life, especially if you're a student, that are pushing you closer to Jesus, not all the other stuff. So don't let quick fix belonging, don't let it become whether or not your kids leave you alone when that friend is with them at the house. Don't let it be the thing that, okay, well, I'll just let them do that because they're gonna stop nagging me, or I'll buy that for them because they'll stop bothering me. Actually lean in deeper than that. Be able to look and say, you know what, I've had to have this conversation with a couple of our kids. I don't love your attitude towards your family after you hang out with that friend. What's going on? Because it's easy, it's so easy to aim at the quick fix, right? But quick fixes, they lead to long-term problems for all of us, whether we believe it or not. And finally, in order to avoid quick fix living for ourselves and for our families, we have to go back to discovering purpose. See, if our identity answers the question of who we are, our purpose answer the question of what we are here for. And everybody can get pretty selfish with the answer to this question if we're honest, including me. Maybe for you have young kids, and for your young kids, the purpose of why they're on planet Earth is the next fun activity. I think my 2-year-old, his current next thing, what's the purpose of your life? Get candy. That's the only answer to that question. Maybe for you have kids, or maybe this is your life, I just need uninterrupted screen time. When can I just have the screen and just let I'm just gonna TikTok my way till my brain oozes out of my ears, right? Maybe for you, it's the freedom that a car represents. Maybe you're a teenager who is looking at getting one or thinking about that somewhere down the road, or you just got one, and there's a whole bunch of promise. Maybe you're a young adult and you're thinking about that career you're chasing down, you're thinking about that next job, that next opportunity, that next pay raise. But here's the problem, when those things become our purpose, when we take good things in our life and we make them ultimate, they will crumble because they can't hold the weight of what you're here to do. We model this kind of for our families, and we mirror it way too well, right? But you've heard me say this before if you've been around for a while. Our culture's purpose for you is twofold, and these have not changed. Number one, self-indulgence. You get what you want. Number two, instant gratification. You get it when you want it. And this idea has created this massive sense of entitlement. We can be pretty sophisticated, right? That we kind of present the compromises and the quick fixes that we're using to be able to get what we want, when we want, because we deserve it and other people don't understand. But when we go down that path, it creates a problem. And Jesus, he points out this problem to the religious leaders who actually should have known better in a really important section of Matthew's account of his life. It says, "But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers, and call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." See, Jesus is talking in a section that is often referred to as the 7 woes to the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the people that had sort of been keeping score religiously within the Jewish system. And these 7 woes, these rebukes that Jesus offers them, are about the way that they were trying to practice what it meant to be spiritual leaders and the abuses that followed. That they were hypocrites, they were teaching some things that they weren't following. They were adding requirements to the law that God never did. That they were doing things not to be able to follow God, but to be noticed by people. They were like taking pictures of their food and putting it on Jewish Instagram before it was even a thing. And all of it was about getting the honor that they could from the office. It wasn't about serving people, it was about being served. It was about the status that came with it. And Jesus, he's contrasting it for his followers. That they shouldn't consider themselves better or worse than one another, but instead they should see themselves as spiritual siblings with one another, whose one father is God the Father and one teacher is Jesus. Jesus offers for you and me a formula for our purpose in this moment that is the opposite of a quick fix kind of life. See, the one who's full of himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. For Jesus, that wouldn't even happen until after his death. And that might be the case for you and me too. That might be some case for some people that we know, and it's really hard. We want all of these things to come true this side of eternity. We want the people that are doing wrong to get punished for it instantly. We want the people that are doing right to get the return instantly. But God has a bigger plan than all of that. God has a greater hope than all of that, if we can be patient for it. And key to this, central to this, is the idea of humility, that we would put others first. One pastor describes it this way, that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's not about you and me deciding that we aren't good or that we're terrible human beings. It's about realizing, you know what, when I, out of my identity in Jesus, begin to shift and serve people as a primary motivator in my life with a healthy sense of belonging, then all of a sudden my purpose can shine through. And on top of that sits kind of our purpose, right? And it's been described this way, that God is most glorified in you when you are most satisfied in him. It's why we talk about being God-centered and family first, that the more we align ourselves to this connection with God that we have in Jesus, and the more that we understand our relational priorities in our family, the more abundant our life will be, the greater peace we can find even through difficult circumstances. God is not a cosmic killjoy. He wants you to find freedom and joy. And your greatest contentment in life is when he is most glorified at the same time. Here's the thing, we're gonna talk about what this looks like with our schedule next week, but I wonder, what does your bank account and credit card statement say about your purpose? I'm not asking it to make you guilty. I'm asking it because Jesus says wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart really is. And for some of us, if we go, what's my identity and what's my purpose according to my bank statement and my credit card, your identity and purpose somehow are tied to Amazon. Somehow they're tied to all the places that you've eaten. Somehow they're tied to experiences that are not about serving other people. It's about status for yourself. I wonder, what about the decisions that you're making for your family? See, because quick fix living and parenting is usually pretty visible in our spending, where we prioritize convenience and comfort over the character development that takes time and energy and effort. And the question is not whether or not you can afford to spend that way financially. I know that some of you can. The question is whether or not the legacy and leadership of your home can spend that way and afford it in your leadership influence. And the answer is no, it cannot afford it. And even if it feels like it's not that big of a deal yet, especially if you have little kids, it's coming. Quick fixes lead to long-term problems in your life, in your career, in your finances, in your family. Now, I know that for some of you, it can be really overwhelming because you feel like, what do I do? I don't think I've done this very well for a while. I would encourage you to go check out those links under weekend resources at ehills.org/weekend. If you're on campus with us, to go to the phase walls in the lobby, maybe look at some of the resources there, talk to somebody. But I want to leave you with some hope. See, God loves you more than anyone ever could. And he loves our kids more than any of us ever will. And there's nothing that could change that. And maybe for you, you feel like the quick fixes and decisions that you've made in your life have sort of limited options. And if you're honest, you think about the choices that you've made somewhere along the way like this, you go, well, I guess that's not gonna work out the way that I thought it would for them, you know? And so for you, you go like, I'm just limiting one opportunity after another. And I got a different pair of scissors and they aren't working very well, right? But especially if you're facing this reality with a teenager, maybe for you, you look at the calling and the purpose of their life and you wonder, did I wait too long? Was this something that I should have done earlier? And because I didn't, more and more options from their life are going away. Maybe for you, you go, well, I guess they're not gonna be a professional athlete. I guess that relationship that we put so much time into, that romantic relationship, isn't gonna be their ultimate relationship. And all these hopes that you had for your kids, all these expectations that maybe, honestly, if you're true to yourself, your purpose was that your kids, that they would be able to live out some of the stuff you couldn't, that you didn't, some of the hopes and dreams that you had for your life. But I've got really good news for you. Even if this kind of looks like what your family has looked like and felt like for a while, and you go, I've lived a disappointment, I've parented a disappointment. What's left? You're not doing this on your own. That even if a bunch of paths have been eliminated, even if a bunch of options are off the table, that the God of the universe is involved in your life, and he's involved in the life of your kids. And the amazing good news of that is that there is an identity that God is actually shaping right now in you and in your kids. An identity that is shaped with the pain, with the mistakes, with the missteps. It takes all of it into account. And you know what? If your child, if your student turns to him, then all of a sudden their true identity can shine through. And that's true for you too. Maybe it's taken you decades to sort of pop the false identities and the wrong purpose in your own life, and it's just felt like one slam door after another. And this idea of service over status, this idea of finding real belonging, and this idea of finding what you're really here for, to be able to find your contentment in God no matter what your life looks like, that can shape something so much better. So as we go from here, what are the changes to your home and the priorities of it that can really shape an identity, not just for you, but for your whole family, for your health and the rhythms that you want to model for the next generation, whether you have kids or not, for your hope and the relationships in your life that actually give it to you rather than the ones that just take it, and for the help that you might need to get there along the way. Here's what I'm hoping for. I'm praying that God will keep you in this conversation, that as easy as it is to check out, to phone it in, to go, that's not really me right now. My kids are too young for that to matter. They're too old. It's kind of a lost cause. I don't have kids. I get it. There's lots of reasons that we can always check out of what God might want to say to us. But whatever you're dealing with, whatever pressures you feel, whatever quick fixes you're running to, those are decisions. And we're going to sing a song here in just a second that reminds us that we have a different decision we can make too. That rather than the quick fix life that God has for us, there is a long obedience that God has for us too. Can I pray for you? God, we are so thankful. I'm so thankful for the people that are in this room with me, for the people that are joining us online, for the work that you're doing in all of our lives, God, whether we would claim to know you or not, claim to be people of faith, Christians or not, that you've not given up on us, that our truest identity, that who we are in you is still available, and that there's nothing we could ever do that would make that different. Would you help us, God? Would you help us to see that and experience that in a new way today? Would you help us to trust you with the deflated balloons of our false identities, of our wrong pursuits? Help us to live honest and open lives where quick fixes and living in isolation are not enough, because you died so they wouldn't have to be. It's in Jesus' name, amen.